Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
So I've got a kind of relatively new friend. He and I have been working on some projects together. He's he's got a day job, but he's a musician. One of his passions is music, and he writes all sorts of songs. He's got a kids album, and it's really awesome. And a few weeks ago, he called me up and said, "Hey JJ, I just wrote this new song," and he was super excited about it.
Huh.
And he asked me if I would help him shoot a video because he knew that I did video work, and I actually really like helping make videos. Like it's kind of my hobby, you know.
Right, yes.
So I was like,
Been doing it for
absolutely,
years.
I would love to help you come shoot a music video. So over the past few weeks, we worked on this video. It was a blast. I had it's goofy and silly and fun, and I had a great time. And it turned out really well, and the song was fun, and it was a good project. So last weekend, Dave calls me and goes, "Hey, I got another song that I really want to get out there." Right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Hey, would you mind maybe helping me on another video?" And you know me, I usually just say yes to everything.
Whether you want to or not.
Well, I mean, part of it's like, I really do like helping and serving other people. So I don't often, say no. I try to say yes as much as possible, which is pretty much 100% of the time. So
I have to file that away in my need to know later category.
Yeah, I think you know this already. So Dave sends me over his new song, and he wanted to get it out like right away because it was like a timely. He had written it a while ago, but it was like a timely song for what's happening in Minneapolis right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
you are referring to the riots, is what I should mention.
The riots.
Yeah.
And so I listened to the song, and I was like, wow, that's really sort of, culturally and socially and maybe politically relevant, like right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, wow, Dave, like my first reaction was, you broke from your kids genre here and have got something fairly edgy.
Yeah.
And so I said, hey, give me whatever material you have. Let me see if I can, what I can pull together for you this weekend. Well, that was like a Friday night, and I kind of like listened to the song a few times. I watched the recorded footage he had from the recording studio and the random bits he had, and went to bed, woke up the next morning with an intention of working on this video.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was poking at it and looking at the video and thinking about it and listening to the song, and I just couldn't work on it. And I didn't know why, right? And I sat with it for maybe a couple of hours, and finally I was like, you know what? Something's not working here. I'm going to go work on my fence. Side note, I've been staining my fence for like 3 months. It's a terrible process.
It must look beautiful.
It is beautiful. I think maybe the fence is like, where I go to meditate or something, because I spend hours. It's 43 miles long. So, so I'm out there working on my fence, right? And and the nice thing about working on stuff like that, it's kind of mindless. So it lets your mind just my mind is just kind of wandering. And I had this thought. I said, something's not sitting right with this video. And I thought, you know what? What if I just treat this not as something I want to work on, but as a job?
Mm.
Maybe that will make me feel better, right? If
Ah.
I treat it as a job.
So in other words,
And
if you just put away how you feel, you should be able to
yep,
just act in a certain way.
yep,
Mm.
yep. And I had that thought and I stopped and I was like, nope, that not even for my job do I want to say I'm going to treat this as my job, let alone
Mm.
a side project that, you know, I should, the energy was just totally
Mm.
wrong. So while I was sitting on my fence, I was really checking in kind of with that feeling, right? And I was just really realizing that, I just had this feeling in my gut that I didn't want to work on the project. Like it wasn't aligning with me in some way. Like my energy and the energy of the song and the energy of the times, none of that was working.
Wow.
Um,
Yep.
so right there, I went and I I shot him a text and had said, "Hey, I can't work on the song. It's not going to work for me. Like I can't
Wow.
do it." Um, which is not a typical thing I do,
No,
right?
it's not at all.
Sometimes I would just plow through that and ignore my feelings about it,
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
just deliver something, right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't. I couldn't.
Mm. Why do you think um, why do you think now was different for you? Like what has happened for you, do you think, over the last several months or the last year or so, as you've been on this self-awareness experience, being more mindful, noticing yourself more?
Mhm.
Like what happened for you now that allowed you to stay the course and be in your centered space and say no? Like what was different, do you think?
Well, uh, I mean, certainly over the past couple months, you and I have been talking about this a lot
Yeah,
more,
yeah, a
right?
lot
We've
more.
been working on
Mhm.
this podcast. We've been working
Mhm.
on um, the map and the journey and all this stuff together. And I think really what it was for me is we did um, an episode on forgot what it was titled, but like about checking in with yourself, checking in
Oh,
with your
right,
body,
yeah.
um, and really like stopping and exploring that physical feeling that's coming up from your body. That was it, because I was sitting there standing on my fence. I could feel this.
Mm.
I could feel it coming out of my body, and
Yeah,
I explored it. Right, I stopped and I sat and I explored it.
yeah. So I just want to
Like
ask you a
teaching
couple.
from you.
Well, I want to ask you a couple questions though, because this is so helpful. Like this is so interesting. So when you said you felt something in your body, like, can you just be more specific? Like, what did you feel? Did you get a stomach ache? Like, did your shoulders get tight? Like, what happened? Do you
Mm,
remember?
that's a good question. Yeah, I'd say that feeling for me um, was uh, it was it was like an uneasiness, but
Mm.
it was really like deep in my body. It was almost like
Hmm.
coming from my hips,
Yeah.
like an uneasiness through,
Yeah. Wow. That's
real
super.
low in my body
Yep.
uh, up through kind of my whole core,
Right.
in my
Right.
head. So, uh,
That's such.
and that I kind of knew it wasn't like a superficial, like I'm just kind of got anxiety about things. It was a
Right.
real deep reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did that reaction feel familiar?
Ooh, yeah, I'd say like I'd felt that before in some different contexts, and uh, e- when I had a very similar feeling, actually, like when my ex business partner and I were also not
Mm,
seeing eye to eye. It was like
yeah.
um, but if, again, like it wasn't like a conflict between people, even,
No, no, no,
even my
no.
business partner stuff wasn't even so much a conflict between people. It was a difference in values and energy, maybe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
You
so
know
I
what?
think the idea that energy is not aligning with a project or a person,
Mm-hmm.
you can feel that.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'd even make it more broad and say that our bodies, and I've said this before, and I know we've mentioned parts and pieces of this, but this is a really good example of how our bodies will tell us exactly what's going on before we have a conscious awareness of that. But forever we just put that away. Like we ignore, we'll get this, you hear people say, I had a gut reaction to something.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes people will use that as a positive example, like, oh my, I had a gut reaction that just said I should do this. You hear entrepreneurs talk about gut reactions a lot. You hear people that are comfortable with risk talk about gut reactions, but they're usually referring to it more in a positive light. However, the gut reacts, in many, many people, the gut is reacting all the time. But if it's not favorable for us, like if we have feelings that we judge ourselves like, oh, like in this case, I should just be able to do this little video. What's the big deal? My name's not on it. It's just this guy's work and he's my friend. But there was something intrinsically that wasn't in alignment with your feelings inside. So what was happening on the outside didn't match your feelings on the inside, and you were having a physical and emotional reaction to it. And we have those literally hundreds of times a day. This isn't special. But what's so special about this is that you are now like noticing that, and not only noticing it, because a lot of times we'll notice if something starts to not feel good, but then we make ourselves wrong for it. So we try to pretend like it's fine. And then that just sits inside of us somewhere. Mm-hmm. And in this case, you chose to act in your highest and best interest, which was different than what you would have done for a long, long time in your past. Mm-hmm. So it's not even a judgment, right? It's not bad or good. It's not like you were failing before and now you're not. It's not like you're enlightened now and you'll never have that happen again, of course. But what a win that you had that experience. Like, I think that is really kind of amazing.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, because we talk about this, and I think like as we talk about self-awareness and, it can sound like a kitschy phrase, and maybe we even overuse the phrase self-awareness. And, most of the time if people are looking at self-awareness in the dictionary or on Google or whatever, it throws you into the Buddhist quotes, or it throws you into, meditation and Eastern philosophies, which are all fantastic and absolutely true. Yet there's a very simple, logical, easy way to be, which is what we're talking about. It's just the day-to-day, like how does being more self-aware impact your ability to stay happy and content and productive and not have those feelings that hop up and sit with us.
Yep. So my follow-up feelings to saying no to the project were, of course, like I felt bad about it. Like I felt like, I feel bad that I can't deliver this because I really want to be helpful. Like my true intention is to be helpful, right? But then I realized, like, of course, forcing a project out that I'm not in alignment with isn't going to be my best work. It's probably not even going to be good or passable work. It might just be terrible. And then what's awesome is my buddy was super gracious about it. He, no problem, man. I understand. Like, and it was wonderful of him to do too. So, all wrapped up, it
ended up fine.
It ended up fine.
Yeah. Because don't you think so many times, like we have a feeling or a realization about something inside of us. And that it's an instant reaction. It doesn't take forever. It doesn't ponder. It doesn't wander around and then all of a sudden hit you. Like it's an immediate response. Like your body, your emotional body, your physical body, your mental body will have an emotional or will have an immediate response. But what we do with that response is where all that energy gets sucked, because we feel guilty about it. We just ponder it. We worry, what's the other person going to think? What will this look like on the outside? Will I be going against the grain? Will I be thought of as less than favorable? Will people get mad at me? And all of those emotions that we're covering up that instant feeling, all of those emotions are what get us all bungled up. And I think a lot of times when we just call it, like you just called it, and he was absolutely fine with it. There's some learning in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking back to, again, a previous episode where we talked about these things come up, right? And every single one is an opportunity to learn and practice, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, to me, it's not like, oh, I became self-aware and now I'm done, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It happened. We'll check that off the list and move on, right?
Wouldn't that be awesome? Boom. Just go to the last lesson.
Right? It's like a daily practice, right? And like you said, it happens all the time, every day. We're only consciously noticing a very, very small amount of it. And I'd say for me, I'm only probably noticing the peaks, right? The top, the
high
dramatic,
waves, as I always say.
the highest wave, right? But if we can sit and listen, and feel, we can start noticing the smaller waves too.
Yeah. I think that's the really, and the other thing that I would say about that is what's so funny about this work is when we enter into the experiment of exploring ourselves a little bit, often it's with trepidation or a little fear, or this is going to be scary because I have this history. I have all these emotions that I've been carrying around with me for 20 years, or I have all these this history of relationships that weren't good, or blah, 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 whatever it may be. When we first enter into the experiment, it seems scary. And then once we're into it, what's so fun is that we recognize that it isn't scary at all. It's super freeing. And the other thing I think that comes right behind that, in my own example, when I start thinking about becoming more self-aware, the one thing that I've really noticed in my experience, and I'm sure not there, I've got a long way to go yet, but it's how other people interact with me as I'm exploring my own self-awareness. And what feels huge to me, oftentimes other people don't even notice. But I notice. I notice. And I feel so good. And I feel so satisfied with how I'm being. Like, I'm so satisfied with that. And it's not the immediacy of these changes. It's as I stay in this place of, no, oh, here I am again. I could do this for this person, or I could just honor how it feels for me to be more honest how I'm feeling. As I do that more and more, it becomes easier and easier, and other people begin to notice. And it's a pretty big shift. And then the energy comes back to you. So like, if people are ever wondering, like, where am I in this self-awareness journey? Like, how do I even know? How do I even know? I always say there's really two quick questions that you can ask yourself. And the first question is, how do I feel? How do I feel? I mean, that's just a real easy one. How do I feel? Because if you feel good and content, and it's naturally easy for you most of the time, you probably have a really good start in the self-awareness journey. But the second question is, what's coming back to you? What's coming back to you in your relationships? Are they healthy, positive, they also feel very easy and you're very satisfied. That's another thing to ask yourself. So even just using those two kind of anchor questions, I think it's a really easy way to enter into this exploration. And I don't ever think we're done, you know?
Right. Well, because you and things around you and everything's kind of always changing. So there's always work to do.
Yeah. There's always more to do. There's always more to do.
And I have 42 miles of fence left to stain, so I'll have lots of time to reflect.
So in 2 weeks' time, you've only done 4 miles.
Yeah.
That's really, that's a great visual. I think you should do the whole Huckleberry Finn thing and get a bunch of kids involved with paintbrushes and whitewash.
That's perfect. We'll do another podcast episode, kids and self-awareness and staining fences. It's going to be
and it'll be awesome. And getting them to do what we want before they're aware. That's actually a trick because kids are way more aware than we are, but that's another whole episode.
Well, thanks for chatting and thanks for listening to my story today. It's really helpful to, even after we have, after I have a moment like that, it's actually really helpful to go back and talk about it and think about it a little bit more because, it just makes it that much easier along.
Yeah, it does. And I think too, the more that you have those experiences, because they're happening all the time, the more that you have awareness of those experiences in the moment, you can tell that you're cleaning out your kitchen, so to speak, right? Like you can tell you have really become more and more aware because you're noticing even in the moment when those things are happening. So it's just a really cool process. I'm happy for you. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.